Great. All right. Thanks, Jamie. We'll kick off. Brilliant. So what is the difference? Some of you will have more knowledge of the difference than others, but very broadly, the difference exists to change a story on school exclusions. And we do that by improving life outcomes for vulnerable children, by raising the status and expertise of those who educate them. So that's kind of broadened over the last 5 years that we've been running as a charity, how we work with those adults and those who work with children. But that is the premise of what we do. Next slide, please. And why did the charity start? It's a very good question. Some of you might know this woman in the slide. That's Kieran Gill. She's our CEO. She's got a great presence and she's a real ideas person. And it's because of Kieran that the difference exists. She set about doing a piece of research with a think tank in 2016, I think, which wanted to look into why children are getting excluded, who's getting excluded, and what trends there were, because at the time there wasn't lots of research into that. And it was through that research piece that she realised that there was a lack of expertise in mainstream schools, that schools really needed help and were asking for help to recognise student need earlier and know how to respond to that. And then also it was finding that teachers were becoming excited to work in alternative provision. They were wanting and needing that expertise. And so one of the recommendations from the charity was, from the research, was to set up a charity that did that, that could kind of facilitate that knowledge sharing within the mainstream sector and the alternative provision. So that was when the difference was set up. Thanks. I'm going to hand over to Jamie now.
So at the point of that piece of research coming to a conclusion, Kieran decided that the last thing that education needed was another piece of research that told everybody how bad things were, and set about making a difference into a charity to address some of the issues that came up in the report. And now you'll have read a little bit about the differences work on our website. There are three main components to our work: people, practice, and policy. When we talk about people, that's our programs and how we develop leaders through our Difference Leadership program, and also now our Inclusive Leadership course, which you may have seen on our website as well. In terms of practice, that's how we share across our network in terms of our communication, our conference that we've got coming up this weekend, how we share best practice and people solving and finding out answers to problems that are happening right now in schools, how we can spread that quickly across both mainstream schools and alternative provision. And more recently, our policy arm, our research and influence kind of arm of the Differences work, is looking at how we can influence the DfE, how we can work with government to make sure that some of the issues that came up in the report are addressed consistently. There we go. If you're interested to read any more about that, our website has lots of information about that. Now, like any good primary school practitioner, which is my background, I'm going to kick us off with a quiz, and you mustn't worry, this isn't part of the interview process. It's not going to be recorded as part of a screening to see who's suitable for this. But we're going to go for Who Wants to Be a Millionaire style, fastest finger first here. So I'm going to ask you a question, and you're going to put either A, B, or C in the chat. And that's thinking about the cohort of pupils who were born in 2002 to 2003, the academic year. What percentage of those pupils, by the time they finished school age 16, had experienced AP in some form, alternative provision in some form? 3, 2, 1, put your answers in the chat, off you go.
Getting quite a lot of C's coming through. I'd say majority C's and a few B's. No A's.
That's interesting. Thanks, Sarah. So the correct answer here is 3%, which might not sound like a lot to you on paper, but if you extrapolate that and include alternative provisions that are funded by local authority or independent special local authority funded places in AP, that goes up to nearly 4%, which is almost 1 in 30 pupils. So almost 1 in 30, 1 in every class or standard class size of 30 will have experienced alternative provision by the end of their school career, age 16, which 1 in 30, when you think about one child in every class you teach, that does start to put into context the kind of size of the issue as well. Next question. I'll wait till I say go this time. I saw a few people jumping the gun last time. But what is the most common reason for permanent exclusion in England? A, physical violence. B, being disruptive in class. C, drugs and alcohol. Put your answer in the chat now. What is the chat saying, Sarah?
Majority of answers are B, with a few A's. AB, actually. I'd say 50-50 split AB.
Thank you, Sarah. So yeah, I mean, A and C, I think certainly before I was well versed in the work of the difference, I would often think exclusion came after kind of a flashpoint incident or a serious like one-off incident that happened, but actually B is the correct answer here. So the most common cause of exclusion is persistent disruption in class, and that's been pretty consistent since the records began back in 2016 as well. So that might surprise some of you, it might not for others, but the amount of people that put B would suggest that people are quite familiar with this information too. Next question. How many suspensions happened in England in autumn 2021? So it's not, yeah, it's not last autumn, but let's just go into the year before. How many suspensions do we think happened? A, 2,097, B, 3,167, or C, 183,317? Answers in the chat.
First wave of people said B's, and now we're moving on to C's. So there's a trend of the B's and the C's.
The B's and the C's. Thanks, Sarah. So the correct answer here is they're all quite pertinent numbers in terms of exclusion statistics, but the correct answer here is 183,317. It's particularly interesting for us when we think about exclusions in our day-to-day jobs. It's particularly interesting for any teacher, really, is that's the highest number of suspensions since those records began not that long ago. But we also saw a slight reduction in the number of exclusions, permanent exclusions, between 2021 and 2 years previously before the pandemic in 2019. So we saw this kind of interesting pattern, which some of our kind of research and policy work is starting to look at, is permanent exclusions seem to be potentially, based on autumn to autumn, being reduced, and autumn's the term that traditionally has the most permanent exclusion suspensions going up. So we're looking at how internal alternative provisions might be being used across mainstream schools. We're looking at different ways that these things are changing and the kind of landscape's changing too. That's the last of the questions you'll be glad to know. It's back to kind of listening and your chance to ask us questions in just a few moments time. But I think kind of core to all our work is just how poor the outcomes are for children who experience alternative provision. So just 12% of children who were in AP schools got a good pass in English and maths in 2021 compared to 72% in all schools, and we know what kind of a massive enabler good literacy and math skills are for life outcomes. 1 in 3 students who attended AP schools became NEET, or they weren't in meaningful next step at age 16 in the same year, and the estimated cost of excluding a young person to the state is £370,000. So all those kind of things, when Kieran did the research, as the research deepened over the years, point to the kind of the issues that are created by exclusions. And it's very important to say that the difference isn't saying no exclusions whatsoever. The difference recognizes that exclusion is a tool for school leaders, and a tool that very often can mean a child accesses the right support for them in their school career. What's you, Sarah?
Great, thanks, Jamie. And this slide is just demonstrating the early thinking that Kieran had when she was setting up the difference, which is actually alternative provision is a real hub of knowledge and working with the demographic of children who need kind of extra support, and was a real place that we could learn from. What she also found was that mainstream teachers weren't thinking of AP as a career route. So really she wanted to bring the two sectors together so that they could knowledge share, so we could get the good practice from alternative provision and we could get mainstream leaders understanding it and sharing it. And just a quick question, has anyone been to an alternative provision? I'm not going to do hands up. We're going to do speak in the chat if you have been to an alternative provision. Maybe you've gone on a visit, maybe you've seen a young person that you taught once. Yes. Totally fine if you haven't, by the way. Quite a few of our difference leaders who do the programme have never stepped foot in one. But it's interesting, quite a lot of people have. Worked on. Great, all right. Thanks, everyone. So I just wanted to do some myth busting, because I'm a big fan of that. I worked in alternative provision for a little while before I moved to the difference, so I feel quite passionate about dispelling some of the myths, and we believe in open and honest communication as an organisation, so we want to speak to you about this. So the first misconception is that alternative provisions have lower standards. this isn't true. I would say alternative provisions recognise the hard work that they need to do and are very passionate about improving outcomes for vulnerable children. And so a lot of the time they're there, but working a lot harder than mainstream schools might have to kind of hit those standards. But the expectations from the staff aren't lower. I think that is the key thing. The staff have very high expectations. Another misconception is that you'll have less teaching time. I wonder will any of our difference leaders talk about this when we chat to them shortly, but you will actually be teaching more or similar to what you're teaching in mainstream school. So alternative provisions often have a smaller kind of pupil role, but kind of more teachers than you might expect to the pupil ratio, but everyone on alternative provision does a bit of everything really. So some APs we work with, even the deputy head or head teacher has some class timetabled teaching, and that's because you need to utilize your staff properly, but also, you know, it's about engaging with the children and finding the best teachers to be in front of them, and that might be different staff members. Misconception that APs are aggressive places to work. This is one I feel very passionately about. I mentioned it, but I laughed loads at my job and I loved it, and I was very amazed by the staff that work there, but also the children are wonderful. There are, of course, incidents like there are at mainstream schools, but I think there are just, in a condensed group of people, you might see more incidences in alternative provisions, but overall they're definitely not an aggressive place to work, and that's a very negative narrative that we work hard to challenge. Smaller classes equals less challenge. I would say prepare to have your practice really tested, and you'll know that you're a good teacher when you move into alternative provision, because the classes that you teach are smaller, but they're going to need more variated learning. They're going to need you to be prepared to work out what each student needs in that moment, and keeping those children engaged is tough, but it's very, very worthwhile. And the last one is that good always equals good. So I think Ofsted are still working out how to grade what good looks like, and actually alternative provision is so varied as a landscape that what good means in one place is actually not good in another. So it's just us flying the flag that we're an organization, we've set up the program to understand what good is, and share that more widely. So we're just preparing you that good in AP might not be the good that you're used to in mainstream schools, because you're looking for different things, and you have different needs. So that was my 101 myth busting AP misconceptions. Thanks, Jamie. So if you are still with us and you are excited by the challenge of working in alternative provision, which I hope you are, you'll then want to know about the Difference Leadership Programme. So this is an infographic of our 2-year overview. You'll see on the left-hand column, this is where we're at now. We're doing the recruitment. So we're attracting exceptional teachers like you. You'll go through a selection process, which I'll talk about in further depth later on, but we run a competency-based recruitment model. If you're successful at passing that, you'll come into summer training. So we'll have a week and a half of summer training, half a week residential in July, and then another week in August. And then this is the good bit, the 2 years on the programme. So you'll step up into a leadership position within an alternative provision. That will be progression for you, but for different people, that will be different roles. You'll work closely with the community, the parents, you'll do parental engagement, you'll work multi-agency, you'll have a leadership project that you'll undertake with your school. That's why they want to work with you, they want your expertise. And you'll have fortnightly supervision with a psychologist to kind of talk through your experiences. We believe that to be the best for children, you need to be a regulated adult yourself. And sometimes it's really hard. So we're saying that's totally fine. And here is the support for you. Once a half term, you'll come out for training with us. That's our inclusive leadership course. And this is specialized training to make education more inclusive and to help your leadership style. You'll also have in-school coaching with wonderful people like Jamie, who's a tutor. And you'll also have your Difference Leaders network. So we've got 4 people on the call, maybe they'll mention that, but you're entering a network of people who are previous Difference leaders, people at the Difference, our extended network. You're opening yourself up to great links, communications, and knowledge sharing with a whole network of people who are as passionate about inclusive education as you are. After the 2 years, we hope that you return to mainstream in a promoted position, leading the inclusive systems and practices that we've talked so much about on the programme. So that might be a deputy head of inclusion, that might be leading on pastoral. You're going to take everything that you've learned from the programme and filter it back into mainstream. Thanks, Jamie. So I mentioned our network. This is our network of difference leaders. You can see some lovely faces. We're recruiting for our 5th cohort of difference leaders. So over the last 4 cohorts, we have a 60 plus group of difference leaders, and they're working across 18 different local authorities and boroughs in the country. And we're really excited each year to grow our kind of focus and our impact. So you might see that from year to year, we have more on different placements. So if you live in an area which isn't shown on this map yet as having a difference leader, that doesn't mean that we won't place there. We're working hard to have placements across the country. So there's just a note on that. And this year, we're aiming to place between 25 and 30 difference leaders. Thanks, Jamie. And so who are our difference leaders? I'm a bit biased. I think they're a great group of people, but we are very proud of them. They represent diversity in so many different ways: diversity of thought, diversity of experience, and diversity of life experience, ethnicity, gender. You can see some of our diversity stats there. And as an organisation, we really believe that leadership in schools needs to be more diverse, and more work needs to be done to radically improve this. Not only for the children that you work with to see people like themselves succeeding and understanding there are great things out there for them, but also, I've mentioned before, diversity of thought is so important, and we need to see that at a leadership level. We run relational recruitment practice at The Difference, so we'll be getting to know all of you really well. We have D&I reps, and we've just started a new strategy as an organisation to work on diversity internally as well, which I'd happily talk to you about at another time. So some of you are thinking, great, I'm going to do The Difference. I'm going to do my 2 years. It's going to be a bit tough, but it's going to be amazing. And then what? Then what happens after? And we know progression is so important. And we're as invested as your progression from this programme as you will be. 75% of our difference leaders progress into higher leadership roles, and we spend the majority of the 2nd year of the programme focusing on building your network, like I said, so tangible contacts that you can work on and meet to get your next step, but also the practical nuts and bolts of like writing an amazing cover letter or an application. And we've actually got a little slide for you to see some potential, yeah, that's great, thanks Jamie, next slide. Some potential case studies. So these are difference leaders of the past, the ghosts of Christmas past. And I'm not going to read through them, but I'm just going to pause for a second so that you can see we have a real breadth of experience every year in our difference leaders. But hopefully what you'll see is a trend of coming in at a level, working in an interesting alternative provision school, and then leaving the programme into a promoted position. You'll also see there that some people are coming from international schools, some people are coming from local authority schools, some people are primary school teachers. I think Vicky's journey is very interesting. She was a deputy head teacher when she applied for the programme, and she stepped into a deputy head teacher role. So not necessarily direct progression there, but the sideways step for her was really important to get more experience in the alternative provision sector, so that when she was ready to become head teacher, which she is now, she has a really thorough understanding of both spaces. So she's a very competent and cohesive leader. Great, thank you, Jamie. And I've mentioned a few times now that the experience that difference leaders have and our difference leaders themselves are very varied as a group of people. So I'm going to precursor this slide with, this is not everyone's journey. It's different from person to person. But I said we're an open, honest organisation, and we wanted to talk about the journey that this programme is, because it is a real journey. You're on a leadership journey, you're learning new parts of your practice, you're working in a space you probably haven't worked before. And so it is natural that there are kind of highs and lows, peaks and troughs, and real learnings. So we kind of find in year one, you're really fired up for an excitement, joining a group of people who you feel inspired by, you develop strong relationships, but you also begin to see the reality of working in alternative provision and in a space and with children who are often facing lots of compounding disadvantage. It is difficult. As you move into year two, you start to develop that leadership identity, you show more confidence and creativity as a leader, you also see some of the unglamorous responsibilities that leaders have in any space, but particularly in AP, I think you've really got to roll up your sleeves. But ultimately, we feel at the end of this time on the programme, you're going to take 2 years of amazing frontline experience and expert training delivered by specialists into the next steps of your career. Great, thanks, Jamie. And I'm going to stop talking. Our difference leaders, I think all of them are on the call. So Jordan, Gareth, Perry, and Sarah, please can you unmute yourselves and say hi.
Hi, everyone.
Great. That was like unison, like we planned it. Perfect. So we're a little bit behind. I'm just going to go straight into it. We've got you for the next half an hour. And people on the call, if you have questions that you want to ask the difference leaders, we might have some time at the end for questions, or you can type them in the chat. So be capturing your questions now. But I'm going to go through one by one and ask you to introduce yourself. Tell us where you were working before you joined the difference, and then tell us your position now and where you're working. So Perry, I'm going to start with you.
Thank you, Sarah. My name's Perry. I'm currently at the Boxing Academy in Hackney. My previous role was in a prep school, so a bit of a contrast to some of you who are in mainstream. I've been in mainstream prior to that. I was there for 3 years and yeah, joined the difference in September.
Great, thank you. Sarah.
Hi, Sarah. Hi, everyone. So I'm Sarah as well. And I had various roles before. So I came from a mainstream school in Barking, and I had various leadership roles, such as being an assistant head teacher and a lead practitioner. And now I'm working at the Haringey Learning Partnership as an associate leader and head of English.
Great, thank you. Gareth, over to you.
Hi, evening. I'm Gareth. I was at the same secondary school in Barking as Sarah, a happy coincidence, where I was a head of year. I am now at Olive Academy, the Multi Academy Trust. I'm at one of their schools just outside of Cambridge, and I'm assistant head teacher in charge of, it feels like everything, but being honest with you, teaching and learning, and a few other bits and pieces in between.
Great, thank you. And Jordan, last but not least.
Hi, I hope you guys can see me because I can't actually see myself, but yeah, hopefully you can. So I started off actually in an AP and then was there for a year and moved into mainstream where I then trained to become a teacher. And I was a business teacher there and then came onto the course at Harris, Aspire and Professional Skills as an associate senior leader.
Nice one. Thanks, everyone. So we're going to dig into some of these questions. How did you hear about the difference? What was your knowledge of us before actually doing the programme? I'm going to go Perry, Gareth, Jordan, Sarah, if you can remember that order.
So before I answer that question, I think I was caught like a deer in the headlights when you asked me first. So I don't think I fully answered your question. I'm an associate senior leader at the Boxing Academy, leading maths. So if there's any maths teachers in here, you might be able to relate. How I heard about difference via the TES. I hadn't heard about the organisation before. Saw the opportunity, sort of read about it, looked at the organisation's website, and it's something that really resonated with me, given sort of my background in terms of where I grew up, my experiences in school as well. And I think just some of the information that Sarah and Jamie sort of shared with you about, I guess, the statistics that are out there in terms of how vulnerable young people, sorry, I've gone blank. I apologise. There's a lot of people looking at me right now. Just inclusion in general and just statistics. I think there was one statistic that really stood out about the amount of people in prison and how many of them were actually excluded from school and excluded from mainstream. And I think that's something that really stuck with me and made me think, actually, I can come here and make a difference.
Great, thank you. Gareth, over to you.
Hi. It was actually on YouTube where I came across Kieran Gill on the sidebar when I was looking at something regarding exclusions as it was then and working as a head of year. And I could understand why a challenging student in a mainstream would work really well in good lessons with good teachers, but wouldn't in other lessons. And that sounds really obvious. And it really made me start to think about why some teachers wanted to exclude because they had maybe poor practice or lack of training themselves. And it led me on this journey of discovery, and I ended up virtually bumping into Kieran Gill, and realised this lady talks a lot of sense. I then realised she fronted up an organisation called The Difference, went on the website and clicked through, and here I am a year later.
Here you are. Great. Thank you, Sarah.
Hi. So I think for me, it was more about like my ethos. So I would say that as a teacher first, I am a teacher who is passionate about inclusion, in the sense where I think it's so important to build relationships with students and to know your students and to make sure that every student in your class has no barriers to learning. And I think with my practice, that was very evident with everyone. So when I became a senior leader, before I'd even think about excluding a child, I would also want to know, okay, what can we do as a school to intervene and support? And my colleagues kind of knew that about me. So one of my colleagues said, do you know what? Have you ever heard of The Difference? And I said, no. And they said, I think that you should apply for The Difference because you sound like a difference leader. And then I just Googled, read about The Difference and said to myself, I am a difference leader. I'm going to apply. So literally.
Love that. Thank you. And Jordan.
So I don't actually remember how I found you guys, but I'm pretty sure it was actually just through searching Google. However, during kind of COVID, you had included, but you also did it online as well. So there were some sessions that you could watch, and I was like, oh, I've read the website and everything seems good. Let me go and see what some of these sessions are like. And during it included one of the sessions, I was like, yeah, these guys are just really speaking my language. The things that I'm concerned about and the things that I'm worried about, not only are you aware of, but also kind of helping upskill us to find solutions and create solutions ourselves. So once I kind of saw the type of information that you were sharing with others, I was like, well, it would only benefit me to come on a course like this because it's going to help me to be able to help others. And I wasn't sold a lie.
I'm glad you could say that. Also, that was a nice shout out for Included, which is happening this Saturday. We have unfortunately now sold out of tickets. But if you are coming, we can't wait to see you. If you're not able to come, stay tuned on social media. We'll be live tweeting throughout the day so you can catch up there. I'm going to ask each of you now, difference leaders, to tell us a little bit about your school. So specifically, I'm interested in the size of your school roll. So how many children can you have at your school, do you know? And how many do you have on roll at the moment? And is it a PRU or is it an alternative provision? And anything you think else worth knowing, like is it part of a multi-academy chain or is it a standalone school? I am going to start with Jordan this time.
So yeah, I'm in Harris Aspire and Professional Skills, which is in South Norwood, and we currently have about 380 kids on roll. I think our capacity is, no more than 400. The school is pretty full, but it is really different in terms of your usual AP in that we have provision for year 10 and 11 students, and that works as an alternative provision. But we also have a respite facility for short-term placements for year 7 to year 9. And then as well as that, we have a vocational sixth form. So students who generally don't do too well in their GCSEs, can't go on to study level 3. We have a level 2 courses for them. And the year 11s actually are involved in those level 2 year 12 classes. And then we have level 3 provision, which is vocational courses again for year 12 and 13. So it's a real mix. We have a sixth form as well as an alternative provision, as well as kind of a respite space. So it is as chaotic as it sounds, but it is really interesting because you get, I get to work with year 10s and year 11s, and then I get to actually go and work with like a year 13 level 3 group. So it does really strike a nice balance for me. So.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for raising it. It's quite different, Jordan. We asked this question to you guys so we can highlight that the schools that we place in are very different to each other. So thanks for showing that. I'm going to go to Sarah, then I'm going to go to Perry, and then I'm going to go to Gareth. So Sarah, do you want to tell us a little bit about HLP?
Yeah, so HLP is an alternative provision, which means that it's part of like a trust. It has various provisions. So there is one provision which is specifically for children in the community. So it's called tuition in the community. And those, I guess this provision is for students who are not able to go to school, maybe due to like health reasons, and they are tutored in the library. Then there is another provision which is sort of for more SEMH students. Then we have a sixth form, and we have, I guess, the biggest facility, which is for social, emotional, but also behavior as well. I guess we're allowed just under 200 on roll, but at the moment we have around 80 students on roll. And I work at the, I guess, the biggest provision, which is the sort of students with behavior needs.
Yeah, great.
I
Thank
answered
you.
everything.
Yeah, tick, tick, tick. Gold star.
Okay.
Thanks. Barry, over to you.
Hi. The Boxing Academy is an alternative provision. It's an independent free school. I suppose the difference between that and a pro is that we are able to be selective. And by that, I mean, the philosophy of the school is run on boxing. And every pupil takes part in boxing daily. There's an Olympic-sized boxing ring, there's punch bags. We have members of staff known as pod leaders who effectively have a massive focus on the pastoral side of things, and they're present in lessons with us, and they have a pod of pupils that they stay with throughout the day. So yeah, pupils have to buy into the philosophy of boxing, or the school, I guess the school doesn't reject them, but possibly suggests other alternative sites that they could visit. We've got 40 pupils on roll, and I think we're maxed out at the moment, so it's a very small school. 5 subjects are offered: maths, English, science, and then boxing as a qualification, and PE as an MVQ qualification. I think that answers all your questions, Sarah.
Yeah, great answering. Yeah, Perry has a very unique school, and it's actually worth a Google because I think it's a super interesting one in terms of like specific focus, which alternative provision schools have the possibility to do, unlike mainstream schools. And then Gareth, come to you.
Hello. So I work for Olive Multi Academy Trust, working at one of their schools. Really well organised, really slick, some great people. Genuine, I'm not just saying it, they're not paying me to say it, but some good people that work at Olive that really support you and challenge you at the same time. I'm in a slightly unique area. Well, not unique, an unusual area, one that I'm not used to, in that there are no permanent exclusions. So how we receive referrals is through the local authority, which isn't unusual. But what is unusual is that they will pay us a fee to house their student, and they're dual registered. So, and the fee will vary depending on whether they're in or out of county. If they're out of county, we can charge what we want. But the kind of the advantage of that is the more on roll that we have, and we are soon to be maxed out at 50, we can hire more staff, and that's how it works. So it does get busier, but we can hire more staff to go alongside to do that. We teach the core subjects, as you'd expect, and a range of BTEC level 1s and 2s alongside. It's not unique to Olive, but we have a huge focus on outdoor education, which is actually where I've been today, I've actually been motorcycle repairing and riding, not me personally, but with that attracts a range of BTEC qualifications. So they're keen on the vocational offer here at Olive.
Great, thank you. I'm going to roll these 2 last questions into one. So I'll give you different leaders a second. But when I come to you, can you tell me what your highlight has been so far on the Difference Leadership Programme? Can be school related, can be difference related. And how have you developed in the first term? Bit cheeky because we're kind of into the second term now. But how have you developed? Who would like to go first? I'll be nice on this one.
I think Perry looks good to go first.
Thank you, Gareth. I guess my highlight would be, I mean, there's been some great things happening at my school, but I think the real highlight is having a cohort of difference leaders to bounce off. There's usually a lot of chat happening in our WhatsApp group. We see each other at least once a half term, and I think just that support network has been invaluable. Because you join a school and you're effectively by yourself. I know there's a couple of difference leaders who are in the same school, but generally you sort of meet this lovely group of people in the summer, and then you go off to your own individual schools, and that can be quite daunting. So just knowing that you've got everyone else in the same boat as you, and you've all got varied experiences, but there's lots of things that you can share, is quite a nice thing to have. How I've developed in the first term, I think it's just getting used to a new environment. It is different from mainstream. And I think in my school it is slightly different because we have pod leaders. So in terms of behavior management, which was my real strength as a teacher, I've had to let that go a little bit because there's a real focus on teachers having a real academic focus, so we can build those good relationships with pupils. So you don't designate a particular negative feeling towards the subject because of the teacher, and the pod leaders deal with behavior. And that was sort of a bit of a blurred line for me to have to deal with, and I found that quite difficult. But as time's gone on, as I've built relationships with the pupils, I've kind of got a bit of control of that back. But it really sets up for a good dynamic, actually, because you don't feel like all the behavior onus is on you. And you can sometimes just focus on the areas that you need to, whether it's the academic side of things or, again, the pastoral sides, but not in a behavior management sort of way, really getting to know the pupils and finding out about them, and then focusing on other areas that you might not be able to focus on as a traditional teacher in a mainstream classroom.
Great, thank you. Jordan, I'm going to go to you.
So highlight, I think what I've enjoyed the most in terms of my role is just having a bit more autonomy, and kind of the freedom to have an impact, but that does work hand in hand with your development. So there's quite a few things that go on at the same time, and I think Sarah kind of touched on it, in the sense that we have training from the difference, as well as like counselling, which helps us to kind of be more focused on having a compassionate outlook towards the kids, but not only the kids, staff, colleagues, and then it actually ends up having an effect on how you are as generally as a person as well. But I think the big thing for me when I applied for the difference was, changing, having ideas, but actually changing ideas into actions and allowing those actions to have an impact. And so being able to have the freedom and autonomy to do that hasn't been an easy process, but it's in a process that I've enjoyed, just being able to collaborate with, other teachers as well as people within a local community, and, seeing how many people within our local community are so keen to help and support the kids, but just don't necessarily know how, have a link to them, and being able to create those connections and relationships is something that I've really, really enjoyed. So, yeah.
Great, thank you very much. And I think you're right to name it can feel like a really steep learning curve, but I think we learn best when we are faced with things that we haven't done yet. So I think I'm glad you raised that. It can feel like a bit of a new scary thing, but you're learning all the time. Thanks. Yep. Sarah, I'll go to you.
So I believe that those questions are sort of rolled into one for me, but it's basically what everyone else has said. So the highlight for me has been the networking with other difference leaders. That's been just an amazing experience, because it's quite nice to have that, it's extremely nice to have that support network where if you are struggling with anything, you literally can just we have a WhatsApp group, you can just WhatsApp and just say, hi everyone, could you offer some advice? And we're all such a great bunch of people. Also, I would say the difference team are phenomenal. They're also incredibly supportive, and I don't know how it's possible for every single person of a difference team to be such nice people. Then on top of that, I would say, and I guess this ties in with how I've developed in my first term. So it links to what Jordan's saying, you have an opportunity to be autonomous, where I feel like the difference trust you as a leader, and then your provision trust you too. So when you have a vision, you are given that trust to execute it, and it's nice to see it in fruition. But also I would say what was the biggest challenge has now turned into a development for me, where I found it really hard in the beginning to, I guess, form relationships quite quickly, because in alternative provision, you can't say, I'm going to give you detention if you don't listen to me, or you're going to be excluded, because actually that is the final point for those students. So you literally have to get these students to trust you for them to get things done. And I would say that I've developed most with my practice, where now I'm more compassionate focused, and I am able to build those strong relationships with the students where they trust me. But also, you can't get away with blagging your lesson. After a few years of teaching, that's something you can do in mainstream. You could be like, oh my gosh, I have a plan, let me just quickly blag this. You can't do that. You know, you really have to make sure that your lessons are planned effectively and efficiently for every single child in your class, so that they are engaged, because once they're disengaged, you've lost them. So I'd say I've developed a lot with my planning and building relationships.
Great, thank you. And thanks for mentioning student relationships. I saw Gareth nodding along there, so I wonder maybe he'll speak to it too. But I think that is something that a lot of our difference leaders feel. Often people who want to do this program have very strong relationships with children in their current school. That's what they feel their real strong skill set is. But going into alternative provision, you are going to be faced with children who have unfortunately been let down lots of times by adults around them, but also the institutions of their previous schools. And so building trust with them, like Sarah was mentioning, getting them to sit down in your lesson and pay attention and feel engaged, but feel supported enough to want to engage, is actually a really, really big thing. And all the behavior management strategies that we expect now in mainstream schools aren't really there in the same way. So it really can feel quite vulnerable, I think, when you go into an AP school. But like you said, there's that moment when it crystallizes and you build that trust with the students, and that's when the kind of magic starts to happen. But it can take a bit longer, I think, and that's humbling. Gareth, I'll hand over to you to finish us off for this section.
Hey, if you said everything I was going to say, Sarah.
Oh no!
I'll change tack a little bit. Developing over the first term, I mean, there is that initial shock of capture, and it is worth mentioning that. That's probably the easiest way of describing it, where, you know, the first couple of days where you think nothing I used in mainstream works here. I'm just going to have to learn again, start again, and go a lot of it on the basis of my personality. And I think that is my big takeaway from the first term, is that you do have to turn up, certainly when you're in front of students, in a good mood, on your A game. And I know that's not always possible as a human, and it isn't possible as a human. So it's a case of just kind of whatever's going on in your personal life is almost try and leave it at the school gates. Put whatever it is you have to do to regulate yourself, because if you, and I had this the other day where I was late I wasn't late, but I was later than I intended. I was in a bad mood. I've been stuck behind a tractor for half an hour, which is where I am now, and I arrived in a bad mood, and it just rubbed off on the kids, and I rescued it by sort of break time and stuff. But that was my sort of developmental takeaway, whereas you have to be on your A game. Highlight of my course would be kind of what I'd achieved just before Christmas, where I didn't sort of built in target grades and reporting and mock exams, which full on sort of a mainstream cycle of assessment and holding students to account. When we talked about high standards earlier, Sarah, that hadn't happened in my current academy nor in the trust. So I rolled that out, and it was extremely successful. And I'm now rolling it out throughout the multi-academy trust, including with another difference leader that we've got from our cohort, Mark, who works at our Cambridge school, which I thoroughly enjoyed getting one over on him. But that's been my highlight for the course so far.
Great, thanks everyone. Wonderful. And I think, Gareth, that starting every day fresh, and whatever has happened the day before, whatever mood you're in, and whatever has happened the day before with any of the young people, is so paramount to start the day with a clean slate. And I think you really feel that in AP, that you just need to come in again and start positive and be that trusted adult for those children. Great, thanks everyone. If you could stay on the line, we might have some questions at the end. I'm sorry I'm being slightly, just because we started late. So I'm going to talk through now the recruitment process. Thanks, Jamie.
Sarah, sorry, I've got to go and do the pick up my 2-year-old. So lovely to meet you, everyone, and good luck with your application. And see you soon, Sarah.
Sorry, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it. Great. So in terms of timelines, we are now in January 2023, which is a bit mad anyway, but the application window is still open. Hopefully you've all registered now. When you're eligible, you'll be sent a link to your application form. It's a unique application form. So everyone has their own personalized one with their name already in it. If you haven't had that, please check your spam folder or please email recruitment at the difference so we can sort that out for you. We're closing for applications on the 23rd of January. So please don't leave it to the last minute. We might have to close if we have too many applications. But I also know that filling in applications alongside school can be really difficult. So this is a plea from me. If you can fill it in earlier, we would really like to see your applications sooner than the 23rd. Once we have closed applications, we'll go about marking them, and then screening and selection centres will happen from the beginning of February right through the month to the start of March. So the whole of February will be our application selection time, and then from March through to May, we'll be talking about matching. So we'll be taking our group of successful leaders and thinking about the right schools to match them with, and that will also involve a school visit for you. So if we find the right school for you, we'll ask you to come with us and go to the school for a visit and teach a lesson and meet the potential head teacher. And everyone will be notified by May, obviously, by the deadline to hand in your notice, so we can sort out the new contract. And you will be employed directly by the school, not by us. We broker that relationship for you and we're here to support you, but the employer is your school that you match with. Thanks, Jamie. And in terms of our selection process this year, so our application form is work history, so your standard kind of CV that you'll be used to, but you'll have to type it out in kind of separately. And we'll also have 2 competency-based questions. They're around leadership and motivation. So what I would advise you to do is open up the form, look at the questions, and then write your answers in a Word document, so you can kind of play around with how much you want to write and what you want to write. They're about 400-word answers. All of the selection stages are marked against competencies, our core key competencies that are on the website. Definitely check them out. It is helpful for you to know them because that's what we mark against. We anticipate that this form will take between like an hour, 2 hours, maybe 3 if you're a real perfectionist. So make sure you allocate yourself the time to do it and don't rush it. You'll then, if successful, be invited to an initial screening call. That's going to be a 30-minute call. It's going to be with either Jamie, myself, or one of our colleagues. And we'll be asking 2 competency-based questions there as well. If you're successful at this stage, you'll come to the online selection centre. So this is the chunkiest bit of the process. And I hope I'll get some nods from the difference leaders, but it does feel like a thorough process, but it's actually quite an enjoyable one. So the recruitment process that we use is like I said, relational and discursive. So you'll do 4 tasks over 2 hours, which can feel like quite a lot. It's a role play, an unseen task, an in-tray exercise, and an interview. So it's thorough, but we really want to like get to know you and get to know your thinking and your attitude towards education. So a lot of people do tell us that though it's full on, like you really come away from it thinking more, which is what we hope to offer. And then if you're successful at the online selection centre, we'll invite you to our matching stage. Unfortunately, not everyone who is successful at selection will be able to be matched to a school. And if that is you, we can defer your place for the next year and see if we can find you a school for the following year. Next slide, please, Jamie. I'm going to talk a little bit about matching and the matching process. So we look to find you the right school based on these 3 criteria. Your teaching specialism, so what you're an expert in, what your subject is, the leadership experience that you've had so far, so are you a middle leader or a senior leader, and what does the school need? And also your location, which is not an insignificant point. We ask difference leaders to expect to travel up to an hour. The majority of people travel for 45 minutes. Some people, like Gareth, travel a lot longer. And we understand that people have different personal circumstances, which means they might not be able to do that. And that's totally fine. But we're raising it because actually sometimes triangulating the right location, the right subject specialism, and the right kind of leadership experience for the role isn't that easy. And that's why the match sometimes won't come off for you specifically. But we try our very best to find the right school for you. And we wouldn't want to place you in a school and in a position that isn't going to work for you or for the school. So that is how matching works. And it's very conversational. So we'll keep in touch with you to let you know what's happening, if there's any schools to match with you. And if we have a potential opportunity, we'll chat it through with you. Great. Thanks, Jamie. Next slide, please. I think we might have frozen or lost Jamie, which is fine because that's the end of the presentation, actually, happily. The next slides do just say if you want to contact myself or Jamie, that's another included plug, which is this weekend. So hopefully we'll see some of you there. Jamie, did you want to say something?
Just going to say very quickly, if you are desperate to come into Included and you haven't got a ticket, if you drop me an email on the email there, we'll see what we can do to squeeze you in. But I can't make any promises because it is, we've got 500 teachers and leaders coming from across the country and as far away as Ireland. But if you are interested in coming, drop me an email and we'll definitely see what we can do to get you in.
Great, heard it from the horse's mouth. And then the final bit was just to say, if you have any questions, please drop us a line. We'd love to chat to you. And our email addresses are there. And if you're not already, sign up to our fortnightly sector newsletter as well. So all that's left for me to say is thank you so much to our different leaders for joining us tonight. If you have to fly off now because you've got to get out of school or carry on, then please do. Likewise, people on the call, if you need to leave, feel free. Sorry, we had to start slightly late. But if anybody does have any questions for difference leaders or for me or Jamie, feel free to unmute yourself now and ask away. Just when the tumbleweed comes. And if you have no questions, you can leave.
If you want to wait till the end to ask a specific question as well, then please do that. Thank you so much, everyone who's leaving, who's joined us. Thank you.
Great. So I think that's a thank you and goodbye from most people. If you have a question that pops into your mind on your drive home, which happens to me all the time, you know our email addresses, you can contact us there. Thanks everyone for joining us tonight. We really appreciate it. And hopefully we'll see your application soon. Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Jordan. Thanks, Gareth. We'll see you Saturday. Bye. Ooh, someone has raised their hand. Okay, I'm seeing some questions.
Yes.
Please.
Me.
Yes.
Hi. I did write a question in the chat, and it's just a very quick question. So I couldn't have my camera on so far. I just was wondering because I said I've completed some leadership courses before, and I was wondering whether there would be too much of an overlap if I sign up to another course.